What's going on, guys? It's Greg here, aka NYPrepper. In this video, I want to talk to you about using malls as a fallout shelter and why malls make excellent fallout shelters and which parts of a mall should you go to get the best protection from fallout radiation. So I went to a mall and I got some video footage for you so I can show you the best places to be in a mall to protect yourself from fallout radiation. I think it helps to check out some real world examples of places to go. It's great to talk about things in a theoretical sense, but you actually have to go out there in the real world and find things. So that's what I did. I went to a mall and I walked around the mall to try to find the best areas to go, and I easily found several places within a matter of 3 or 4 minutes, and I'm going to share that with you later on in this video. So I've always said that basements are the best case scenario as far as protecting yourself from fallout radiation, and I still stand by that. But I've had a lot of people write to me and tell me that the area where they live in doesn't have any basements at all, and typically these are tropical areas or subtropical areas of the world, such as the deep south in the United States. And the reason why there's not a lot of basements there is because the water table is very high. And also in many of the desert states of the United States, like New Mexico or Arizona, there's not a lot of basements around, so people freak out and they write me emails and comments asking me what to do. And so here I have an excellent option for you. Malls, okay? Almost every state in the United States has a mall. Almost every decent sized city has a mall. Almost every country has a mall. Even third world countries have malls, okay? So there's no excuse. You can find a mall close to you. I don't care where you live, unless you're somewhere really far back in the wilderness. Then, maybe it's not practical for you. But most people live within 50 miles of a mall. So the question is, how are you going to get there? And is it practical to be able to reach that mall after a nuclear attack? So there's really no excuse not to take advantage of a mall after a nuclear war, unless you are physically incapable of reaching that mall for whatever reason, or if you live in a very isolated area very far away from a mall. Now, one thing to keep in mind is that after a nuclear attack or a nuclear war, there's a really good possibility that your car may not start, and that's because of the electromagnetic pulses that are generated by the detonating warheads. And there's also a good chance that Russia would use an electromagnetic pulse weapon that's detonated in low Earth orbit to take out our power grid, in addition to the actual nuclear warheads that are designed to destroy various military and civilian targets. So between any kind of high altitude EMP weapons or just regular nuclear warheads that are detonated, there's a good chance that your vehicle may not work. If you have any kind of modern vehicle that's not carbureted with a computer in it, it's not going to work. So that's something to consider if you're going to use a mall as a fallout shelter, because as good as the mall is, if you can't get there, it doesn't really help you at all. So you have to have a solid plan on how you're going to get to that mall, and also how you can bring supplies there. You're going to need to stay in that mall for at least a couple of days, ideally 2 weeks, because the radiation outside is going to be very high, and you're not going to want to go out, at least for the first few days. And it also depends on what fallout zone you're in or what fallout contour you're in. The fallout across the US is going to vary greatly depending on the wind directions and proximity to a primary nuclear war target. And I've discussed where the worst areas in the United States will be as far as fallout goes is going to be in the upper Midwest, downwind of our missile fields in North Dakota, Montana, Wyoming, and Nebraska. So anywhere near there or downwind of there, that's going to be the worst. But malls will have a lot of resources in them. You're going to have probably some vending machines you can get after. There might be some food in the food court. There's various types of resources in malls that you can use in a post-nuclear war world. Clothing, just all kinds of things. There might even be some water that you can find from pipes that are still pressurized, or even from water fountains. It sounds kind of funny to take water from a water fountain to drink, but there's nothing wrong with that water. It's just sitting out there and people were probably walking around near it, but there's nothing wrong with that water. Many malls have those giant water fountains. You can take water out of that. It's basically just tap water. You can purify it if you feel that it might have bacteria. You can put some iodine or chlorine dioxide in it. Another thing about malls is that they have generators, a lot of them. So if you can get your hands on diesel fuel after a nuclear war, you might be able to power that generator up and provide some electricity. And also malls have closed circuit TV or security cameras that might not be affected by EMPs. So after the nuclear war, you might have a free security system as long as you can power it up. So before I get into the details of where to go inside of a mall, I want to just refresh the main principles on how to protect yourself from radiation. So when we're talking about fallout radiation, or any radiation for that matter, there's three things that are going to protect us. We have shielding, time, and distance. Okay, so shielding is going to be any kind of material that you put between yourself and the radiation source, and depending on the density of that shielding, it's going to have a certain level of protection, and that protection is measured by halving thicknesses and protection factors. Halving thickness is the thickness of a material required to reduce the radiation by 50%. And then a protection factor is a little bit more complicated, but you can think of it as kind of like the percent of radiation that's getting through. Okay, how much radiation are you blocking? That's what a protection factor is. So if you have a protection factor of 10, that means only 10% of radiation is getting through from the radiation source, which in our case is going to be the fallout. And for those of you guys who don't know, fallout particles are kind of like sand, so they're kind of heavy. They don't blow around in the air like people think, like dust or something. Fallout is heavy, it's like sand. So when it comes down from the sky, it settles onto surfaces, which in our case is going to be roofs and the ground. Okay, so that's where the radiation is going to primarily be coming in from. It's going to be coming through the roof above you, and it's going to be coming from the ground you're standing on. Okay, so those are the sources. We need to shield ourselves from the roof of whatever building we're in, and from the ground outside the building. And moving on from shielding, we have time. And time is another way we can protect ourselves from radiation. All radiation breaks down eventually with enough time. Now, depending on the radiation source, it might take longer. For example, if we look at Chernobyl, it's going to take 10,000 years for Chernobyl to be completely safe and have no radiation. However, fallout is different than Chernobyl or a nuclear reactor. Fallout is just irradiated particles. They're not pure radioactive elements. So they're only radioactive for a short amount of time, and then once that radiation leaves those particles, it's gone. It doesn't come back. Okay, so when it comes to time, we have the 7-10 rule. So the 7-10 rule is such that for every factor of 7 in time, the radiation decreases by a factor of 10. So what that means is that if I have a radiation source that's emitting 100 millisieverts per hour right now, in 7 hours, that radiation source is going to be emitting only 10 millisieverts per hour, 10 times less after 7 hours. And then if we do another factor of 7, which would be 49 hours from now, or basically 2 days, then the radiation would be 100 times less. And then if we do another factor of 7, which would be 2 weeks, we would have radiation 1,000 times less. So you can see the importance of finding a good fallout shelter so you can wait for the radiation to subside. And really the first 2 days are the most critical. You need to be sheltered the first 2 days. It's absolutely critical because that's when the radiation is going to be the strongest, especially the first couple of hours. Now, depending on your proximity to a nuclear war target and the wind is going to determine how long it takes for the fallout to get there. If you're 100 miles or 200 miles away from a target and you're downwind, it might take 4 to 6 hours or more for the fallout to land. So you're going to have some time to get to that mall, whether you have to walk there or take a bicycle or whatever you have to do. You can get there within a couple of hours. But if you're just 30 miles away, you might not have time unless the mall is really close. So the first couple of hours and the first 2 days are really the most essential. You have to be in a solid shelter. Otherwise, you're going to get radiation poisoning within just about an hour of exposure. So you're not going to make it. And then after time, we have distance. So putting distance between you and a radiation source is going to protect you. And we measure the effect of distance with the inverse square law. So what that means is you square the distance from the radiation source, and that's how much reduction of radiation you're going to get. So if I have a radiation source, which in our example could be the ground outside the mall, let's say I'm standing 10 feet away from the mall entrance and there's fallout right outside the mall doors, and I'm standing 10 feet from those mall doors. Let's say I get 100 millisieverts per hour 10 feet away from those doors. That's a very bad place to be because I'm going to get radiation poisoning within just a couple of hours, and I'm going to get a cancerous dose very quickly within just a couple of hours. So if it's 100 millisieverts 10 feet away, if I double my distance and I move back 10 feet to 20 feet away, because I was originally 10 feet away, so I'm going to double my distance and I'm going to be 20 feet away. Now my radiation dose is going to be 1/4 of what it was when I was 10 feet away. Now if I double my distance again and I go back to 40 feet, I'm now going to have quadruple the distance from this radiation source, and now I'm only going to be getting 1/16 of that 100 millisieverts per hour, okay? So that is a huge difference, just moving from 10 to 20 feet and then going from 10 to 40 feet is going to make a huge difference. So that's one reason why malls are really good, because malls are very large. They have a lot of square footage. So even if the mall does not have good shielding, you can still use distance to your advantage, and you can move away from the radiation source by going to the interior portions of the mall, far away from the entrances. But malls are usually constructed of dense materials like reinforced concrete, concrete blocks, bricks, metal, sheetrock. So malls have very dense construction, and they have to be built solidly because they're exposed to a lot of wind. They have a lot of square footage, so they have to be very strong structures. So they're made of very dense materials, and so in addition to the distance that the mall provides from the radiation, you also have all that concrete and brick and steel and metal and all these things around you that you can use to your advantage as well. So a typical mall with its exterior walls alone will give you several halving thicknesses of protection. So even just 3 halving thicknesses is all you need to reduce radiation by about 90%, which is going to give you a protection factor of 10. And then in addition to the exterior walls, you have interior walls that you can use to your advantage. If you go inside of a store in a mall, you're going to have those extra walls around you from that store, in addition to the exterior walls around the mall. And then on top of that, you're going to have the distance from the outside and then from the radiation that's going to be coming through the roof, because malls usually have high ceilings. Even if it's a single floor or single story mall that doesn't have 2 or 3 floors, the ceilings are quite high, so you're going to be pretty far from the fallout on the roof. But if you have a mall that has 2 or 3 floors, that's even better. You're going to have tremendous distance from the fallout on the roof. So those are 2 big reasons why malls are great, because you have all of the shielding material from the exterior walls, and then you have individual stores in the mall itself that have walls around them. And then in addition to those stores, you have also hallways and closets and storage rooms and different types of things that you can use to your advantage to protect yourself, different areas that have shielding. So just to give you an example of some common materials and their halving thicknesses, we have lead, which has a halving thickness of 0.4 inches. Steel has a halving thickness of 1 inch. Concrete has a halving thickness of 2.4 inches. Red bricks have a halving thickness of 3.4 inches. And then sand and packed dirt have halving thicknesses of 3.6 inches. So I went to a mall near me and I walked around the mall and I took some video footage to show you guys where in the mall would be the best place to go. So I want to share with you guys the best places to go in a mall to protect yourself from radiation. So the number 1 rule is to stay away from any entrances or any skylights. Malls usually have big entrances and skylights. So the worst places to be in a mall is going to be anywhere near an entrance or a big skylight. Most malls have big glass skylights placed throughout the mall to let natural light in to lower the mall's lighting bill. And then they also have big glass entrance ways to let natural light in, and if you look at the footage, you can see some examples here from the mall that I went to. You can see the big glass doors and the skylights. You don't want to be near those areas because they don't offer much protection from radiation, because glass, whether it's true glass or some kind of plexiglass, it's very thin and it doesn't provide any kind of shielding from radiation. So you want to be far away from those areas. Now, you could be underneath a skylight, provided that the skylight is several floors above you. So if you find like a courtyard in a mall, and the courtyard is like in the middle of the mall and it's far away from any entrances, but you have a skylight above you and it might be 2 or 3 floors above you, so it could be 200 or 300 feet above your head, that might be okay. Just because it's so high above you, the radiation is not going to really affect you down on the ground. So that would be the only situation where a courtyard might work, if it has a skylight above it. And most malls have like a courtyard or sitting area with fountains and benches, and sometimes they'll have those skylights above you in those areas, and you can use those fountains for potable water because the water's still going to be good. Now, the best spots in a mall are going to be any kind of exit tunnels for store owners, managers, and employees. So typically malls will have tunnels that allow store owners, managers, and employees to access their stores without having to go through the front entrance. And this is important because they have to restock their merchandise almost on a daily basis. If it's a very busy mall, they have to constantly restock their shelves. And for them to have to bring in goods through the main entrance would be a nightmare. So most malls, probably every single mall, is going to have some kind of tunnel that connects all of these stores, and that tunnel leads outside, and that's where the trucks pull in and they get their delivery of goods, and then they bring those goods in and put them on the shelves, and it gives the employees, owners, managers, whatever, key holders, it gives them direct access to their stores without having to go through the main entrance that the customers go through. So if you can find those tunnels, that's an excellent area to be. And the reason why is those tunnels or hallways, whatever you want to call them. I call them a tunnel because they kind of look like a tunnel, but you could call them a hallway. But they usually have reinforced concrete or some kind of concrete block on either side of the tunnel or the hallway. So it's surrounded by concrete. And there's also sometimes bathrooms in those tunnels, or some maintenance closets or boiler room. And if you go into like a bathroom or maintenance closet, you're going to get even more protection than if you're in the tunnel or the hallway. But you might not need to, but that option is there. And if there's a bathroom there, you can obviously use it to go to the bathroom for sanitation purposes. Even though you might not be able to flush, at least you'll have a centralized place to go. So that would be the best area to be, any kind of tunnel or hallway that leads out from the mall. And like I said, those tunnels or hallways are set up alongside the stores. So the tunnel or the hallway will go parallel to the stores, along the stores. So as you're walking down this tunnel, you're going to see doors on the left or on the right, and those doors are access to those stores. So if you look at the footage here, you can see an example of that. Here's a tunnel for employees and managers and store owners, and as you walk down the tunnel, there's different doors, and each one of those doors accesses a store in the mall. So that's the best place to be because of the concrete that surrounds that tunnel or that hallway. Now, in addition to the tunnel and any kind of bathrooms or maintenance closets or anything in that tunnel, you can also actually go into a store itself. The stores themselves will have some extra protection because of the walls around the stores. So the walls will give you some protection, and then a lot of times the stores will have an office or like a back room for the workers to restock the shelves, and for the manager, they're not just stores, they have a back room for the managers and for the employees. So you could go to that back room and that'll give you some extra shielding as well. So those are the best and worst areas to be. Now, you have to remember that chances are there won't be any power, no electricity, so you want to bring lanterns and flashlights because it's going to get really dark in there. So make sure you have lanterns and flashlights. And like I said, some of the pipes might still be pressurized, so you might be able to get some tap water. You can get water from water fountains, like the decorative water fountains, not like a water fountain for drinking, but those decorative water fountains. The water's still going to be in them, so that water should still be safe to drink. And like I said, many malls have CCTV, so there you have a security system for after the radiation subsides. You can monitor outside the mall and see if there's any marauders coming, and you can see what's going on outside. Chances are the CCTV won't be affected by the EMPs. And then many malls also have diesel generators, and you might be able to access those generators, and if you have diesel fuel, you can refuel those generators and get them going. And that's something you want to do after at least 1 or 2 weeks once the radiation subsides. You don't want to go out there and get fuel and get exposed. So that's pretty much it for this one, guys. If you want to see more nuclear war survival videos, check out my nuclear war survival playlist. I'll leave a link in the top right corner. Check out my How to Survive Nuclear War series. If you don't know anything about nuclear war survival, that's where you want to start. So for all you guys out there that tell me all the time that you live in an area that doesn't have basements, well, here's your answer. You can always go to a mall. So that's pretty much it, guys. Take care, God bless, and don't forget the 3 Ps. Prepare, practice, and persevere.